Hey guys, John here, and welcome back to the Synthmaster 3 tutorial course. Today we're going to be concentrating on the wavetable oscillator. Now, a wavetable is essentially lots of different individual waveforms that we can morph between to create some really unique sounds. So as always, let's start off with a fresh preset here, and let's load up the wavetable by clicking this gear icon. Let's go down to Replace With, and we're going to go to Wavetable Oscillator. So now a lot of the controls that we've already been over, such as volume, panning, pitch, and so on, we've already covered. So check out the videos earlier on the course if you want to know about those. So once we have the wavetable open, we can go ahead and select here and let's pick a wavetable to listen to. Let's go maybe for organ 1, for example. The main thing you'll probably notice is how this window here changes. So here we're going to see the display as a 3D view, which is showing us multiple different waveforms. Now, arguably, the most important knob for this type of oscillator is going to be the index knob, so this one right over here. Now, remember that a wavetable is a series of individual waveforms that we're going to morph between, and using this index knob is exactly how we're going to do that. So generally, when we're trying to use this index knob, we're not going to play a note and just move this with our mouse for the most part. This is a perfect candidate for modulation. So for example, if we go to this gear icon, and we're going to cover this part in detail a little bit later on. However, for now, let's go to add new, and then let's select LFO, drag and drop this guy to the index knob, and let's play a note. So here the LFO is moving this index knob for us, and we can make this a little bit more interesting. Maybe make this a triangle wave. Let's set the trigger to random, and let's slow this down a little bit. And also in our envelope, let's increase some release here like that. So essentially what we've done here is every new key press, we're going to be in a different spot of our LFO, and it's also going to be slowly moving. Now, depending on the different wavetable that you pick, this can be really nice because it almost gives each key its own type of sound within the range of the wavetable, which is really interesting. So what we can do is go to the display and let's hit this random button a few times and see what we have with these same settings applied. So here we are with the fresh preset, and remember when I mentioned that we morph between the individual waveforms inside the wavetable? Well, this is going to be the default behavior inside Synthmaster. So again, let's load up a wavetable oscillator, let's pick a waveform, and let's move this index knob here. So go to the gear icon, replace with, and then we're going to go to wavetable, and maybe once more we'll go to the organ 1 here. Now let's do the index. So it's very smooth morphing between these different waveforms. Now, if we select this index here and we go to X fade, we're going to see that this default behavior is going to be linear. Now, if we click this and we set this to off here and go back to our index, now take a listen. So here we hear the individual waveforms. Now we can go back to the X fade, put this back to linear, and then go back to index, and then now we're going to hear this smooth. Now the cool part about this linear mode is that it basically means we don't necessarily have to have a wavetable with lots of different waveforms to sound smooth. So for example, if we go back to this X fade, let's go from linear again and turn this off. And then now let's try to count how many individual waveforms that we hear in this wavetable. So here's the first one. There's 2, 3, and 4. So we have 4 waveforms inside this wavetable. And again, if we go back to X fade and go to linear and start moving this index, it's incredibly smooth, and we did that with just 4 waveforms. So by knowing all of that, what we can do now is hover our mouse over the display. Let's go to the pencil icon and give this a click. And inside here, we can see the individual waveforms. So 4 in this case, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we can also see the frames up here, which is going to be 4 as well. And we can also cycle through these with this vertical line right here. We can click and drag. And we also see the waveform here at the top display to whatever current frame that we're on. Now, what makes this even cooler is that here on 4 frames, even though that's what a wavetable is, we can render this at a higher rate. So let's go to a max of 256, for example. And now let's take a listen. Now here in the center middle, we have an option called blend, and this is a menu for different blending options. So by default, this is going to be on waveform, but let's check out some of the other ones. So the first one is going to be none, and here no blending occurs. So let's take a listen to that. And the default one is going to be waveform, and here the waveforms are going to be cross-faded between each other. Let's take a listen to that one more time. And finally, we have spectral. Now here, the phase and the amplitude of the waveform spectrum are going to be blended. So depending on whichever one you like better or whatever makes your patch shine more, definitely go through the different modes because you might find one sounds better than the other depending on what you're doing. To the right of the blend menu, we have a phase menu, and if we select this here, we have a few different options. So when the phase is set to 0, the phases of partials or harmonics is set to 0. When the phase is set to source phase, the phases of partials in the destination frame is the same as the source frame. And when the phase is set to first, the phases of partials or harmonics are set to the phases of the first frame of the wavetable. And finally, when the phase is set to linear, the phases of partials or harmonics are delayed by an equal amount. So highly recommend to check these different versions out and see what works best for you. And we also have options to normalize and remove any DC offset up here at the top of the synth. So starting from a fresh preset again, let's take a look at how we can make our own wavetables using the effects inside the Wavetable Oscillator. So let's go to the gear icon here, go to replace with, and go to the Wavetable Oscillator. Now for this example, let's just go to the plus here, and we have a sine wave, and if we place some notes here and scan through the table, nothing's going to sound different because this is just a sine wave. So what we need to do is start adding a new effect to this. So down here on the bottom left-hand side, let's click add a new effect. And for this case, let's check out the wave shaper. Now, once we've added this effect here, we're going to see it populate on the left-hand side. Now, if you've ever done any type of animation, this should be pretty familiar to you. However, if you haven't, it's actually quite straightforward. So we have this wave shaper right over here. We can toggle this on and off if we'd like to, but let's leave this on for now. Now, if we select this first keyframe right here, we're going to see that a lot of these settings here start to change, and that's because we're targeting the wave shaper. Now we have stuff like the type. So by default, we have this soft version right here, and there's a lot of different other versions we can check out as well if we'd like to. We have drive, bias, symmetry, and the mix of this effect here. So right now, we're not really doing anything because it's still a sine wave. However, if we go to the last frame right over here, and let's say, for example, let's just bring up the drive, something kind of like that, we can already see the waveform and the spectrum is starting to change. And if we hit a note, this is no longer a sine wave. Now we can grab this right here and cycle all the way back to the beginning, and it looks and sounds like a sine wave. So here is going to basically be how we interpolate between these two different values. So on this last one, let's say we want to do something even more, maybe change up the symmetry a little bit, maybe give us some more drive here, maybe a little bit of bias, something kind of like that. And for this one, let's maybe change to heavy, something kind of like that. So we have this kind of sound. Now, here at the end, since this information, these knobs here are going to be located on this keyframe, but this one is still going to be how it was before. So now we're just morphing between these two different effects. Now, this might be a case where you think, okay, I like this sound, but I want this to be a little bit more high resolution. And again, this is what we can do up here in the frame. So we can go to the 256 max, hit enter here, and now let's take a listen. So that's definitely pretty cool as well. So we can also add some new stuff too. So we can go to add new effect, and maybe for this one, let's go to the bender, for example. Now the first one, we can leave this one alone like we did with the wave shaper, but let's go to the end frame for this guy. And here, maybe we can just choose some bending here, maybe some pitch, something kind of really obvious, and then I guess maybe move the phase, because why not? So it's going to sound like this towards the end. And the beginning, if we grab this here, bring it to the left, our default sine wave. And as we move through this, we have our own different type of wavetable. Now, for example, we can take this one off. Let's add a new one and maybe go for something like lo-fi. And again, let's leave the first one the same. And let's go to this last one. And maybe just kind of bring some stuff up, kind of move these knobs around, kind of get familiar with just changing stuff. A little bit more, something kind of like that. And now, we kind of have a cool effect like that as well. So again, let's turn this one off and kind of look at the wave shaper once more, because I think you kind of get the idea of how this is working. So this is just the first frame and the last frame. However, what we can do as well, if we can double click and put maybe a frame right in here for the wave shaper, and then maybe for this guy, we can go drive all the way up by a symmetry, something kind of crazy like that. And we can basically spend some time in this editor adding these different effects, these different keyframes, and then we basically have our own wavetable. And once you have something that you like and you want to keep, we can go up here to the save menu and we can save the wavetable, or you can export it as a WAV file, and you got 8, 16, 24, and 32 bits. So definitely pretty cool. Now, if we wanted to, we can bring wavetables that we already have into Synthmaster. We can literally drag and drop those right into the wavetable editor. And to make things even cooler is now we can add all these different types of effects on top of those pre-existing wavetables. So the possibilities are pretty endless. And as usual, spend some time with the oscillator, make some wavetables, save them, export them, maybe bring them back in, add some more keyframes, save and export them, and so on and so forth. And you're really going to realize how powerful this synthesizer is. So again, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something, and we'll see you in the next video.